My name is Michael Zetz, and I guess I'm here to talk about the 550 a little bit today. Starting with why that car, and I would have fair to say that cars are, first of all, relational, I guess, and second of all, because of that, sort of our road-going avatars of ourselves, a reflection of who we are, who we think we are, and there's generally something about a car that you relate to, that you feel there's some characteristic of the car that maybe you see in yourself, and therefore it becomes kind of a suitable representative, if you will, to the outside world. That's important to car guys, I think. Part of what makes us choose what we choose. And for me, it was important to have something that I could use. And I thought about how I would use the car in and from the beginning. So using the car was a question of, okay, how are you going to use it? What are you going to do? Where are you going to take it? And for me, I knew I was going to use it on the road. It wasn't a track car. I didn't want a track car. They don't have a lot of outlets for tracks to go to, and it wasn't going to be where I spent a significant amount of time. So if I wanted to enjoy the car and enjoy it with other people, then it needed to be a little bit usable. Maybe not full-on practical, but at least usable. In my search for that, I was reminded, you always have car memories, and when I was in residency, I remember pulling up behind one in downtown Columbus and seeing one for this was the first time. This is probably 1990, late 97.
Real quick, just gonna jump in. At some point, mention your specific vehicle, right? The year and like the Ferrari, right? So like drop that in at some point, like the reason why I chose a '99.
I didn't use all the 97 and 2001. There's essentially no changes.
Right.
So it was just that model. But I will talk about the 99.
Yeah, just so people know like where we're at, right? For
Okay.
the user that doesn't know. Right. And then just real quick, sorry not to totally disrupt you, but do we want to have him every so often like pause between a thought just for like audio clips, or you just gonna let him roll?
Honestly, just let it roll.
Okay.
It's natural that way.
Yeah.
And also focus more on him. I'm listening. I'm engaging. I'm taking notes while I'm doing this.
Yeah, I didn't know where my eyes should be.
Just him, because
Okay.
when you're looking at him, it looks very close to looking at this monitor, so it just works better that way.
Okay, cool.
All right, sorry. Downtown Columbus.
Yeah, no problem. So I pulled up behind one coming down High Street in downtown Columbus, and it was the first time I had seen one, and it was just like, wow. I mean, that is a beautiful automobile. So, the 550, Ferrari 550 Maranello was etched in my mind at that moment, the way things are etched in our minds as car guys, and never forgot it, obviously. So when I'm thinking about what car I want and thinking of something usable and practical, I'm ruling out, track-focused cars. And then I'm looking for something usable, and I'm thinking, how am I gonna take this on road trips? Do I need to have space to put anything? Am I taking anybody anywhere? And the answer to all those questions was yeah, I'd like to. So the next question is, what kind of experience do you want to have? Do you want a luxury experience, or do you want a sporting experience? Or do you want something as close to a supercar as you can find? And for me, the 550 embodies a balance of supercar level performances, especially in its day now. Supercars and everything's gotten a lot faster. But supercar level performance for the day, call it super touring. Touring capabilities, really what it's built for, more than anything else. carry some luggage, carry some people, speed, style, and not in your face. Not showy, not flashy, just if you know, you know. And that, all of that appealed to me and made it, when it came down to it, 3 pedals, gated manual, 4 corners of wishbone suspended, naturally aspirated V12 goodness. Yeah, that was the one. So finding it became the next big step. So the hunt was a couple years worth of looking, watching the market, trying to figure out what was worth what and why it was worth what it was or wasn't worth, accounting for how much major services were going to be and whether or not they had been done and what to look out for. So it's an education process, which I went through with you a little bit, which was fantastic. But as I'm going through the learning and learning the market, you began to realize that there's just not that very many of them. They made 3,080-ish cars from 1997, late 96, through 2001. Made 448 Barchettas, if I'm correct, open-top versions. There's just not a lot of them. By modern car standards, that's not a lot of cars at all. And so at any given time, they're, publicly for sale, I might be able to find 9 or 10. These days, even less. So you were always choosing from a handful of cars in private hands and dealer hands and trying to figure out what was good or what wasn't. So normal process for car guys and anybody just looking to find their car. I knew there were some options that I would like to have, but I also knew that intelligently, when you're searching for a needle in a haystack, you're really better off buying the car's history, buying what's happened to the car, where it's been. Buy that, not the spec. Don't fall in love with a particular color combination and narrow everything down and just say that's what I have to have. It's tempting to do that because you've got a vision in your head and this is your dream car, but in reality, buying the spec can lead you into trouble. So I wasn't willing to settle too much on spec, and I wasn't willing to settle too much on history. So I found that car at a dealer in Ferrari, in Philadelphia, the Ferrari dealer in Philadelphia, I should say. And that turned out to be a great experience, just because it was a one-owner car. It had history there from new, well-known shop in Philadelphia. People I ended up making friends with, who I can call up when I have questions now that I'm 500-600 miles away from them with the car. So back to cars being relational, definitely, when you find the right car and you find the right people, those relationships last, and they're important. So.
Okay, so we have, you touched on the significance for you, the unique characteristics of the car, I feel like, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does this compare to other cars maybe that you've owned or driven? And then I'll just lead you a couple, right? How does this compare? Any interesting stories, history of the car or Ferrari, right? Like,
Yeah, so there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
Like how the car came to be and why it is what it is.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot to that.
Yeah, so those are kind of some good like lead-in things that you can just.
Okay. Well, I guess history of the car itself. The 550 turned out to be really kind of a turning point, I think, for Ferrari, especially in their flagship cars. Up until that point, the Testarossa and before that the Berlinetta Boxer, which was really an answer to the Mira. Supercars had gone mid-engine and had been that way since the real early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And those cars were exciting, and they were really cool looking. They were really cool sounding, and they were exciting. They emoted you on kind of a whole nother level. And there's a reason why, you know, Testarossas ended up on Miami Vice. I mean, that's what you wanted to see. It was just super cool, impossibly wide, and you know, impossibly interesting looking, but not usable necessarily in a traditional sense, and not serviceable. And so at the time that Montezemolo took over Ferrari, Ferrari was in the red. It was not a stable, solid company. They weren't running races in F1, and they were, you know, producing the Testarossa ran, had a long run of production. And by the end of it, believe it or not, they were discounting Testarossas up to 30% and had inventory sitting in the factory. So, you know, you had a car that once the initial shock of how it looked and what it was had kind of worn off, the substance of the car wasn't that attractive. It was already, you know, not the fastest thing anymore. It was already, you know, it was not a race car. And it was a styling, and a beautiful styling thing it was and still is, but Ferrari decided they needed something usable. They needed to give their customers something that they could take out and have and you know, attract people to. So they went back to the old configuration, front engine, rear wheel drive, V12, and went away from the mid-engine. And the 550 was the departing point for that, and the start of what still persists today as we know it. You know, 550, 599, 512, 812 Superfast, and so forth. So, but the 550 was the beginning of that and the departure from the mid-engine, and really began what sort of the classic modern era of Ferrari. And in the 550, you found a truly usable car. So the exhaust is valved. It's valved for sound, obviously, but it's also valved because it creates back pressure, so you have some torque at low revs. It has a multi-plane intake where the intake can be long, either along long runners or short, or lengthened long runners, depending on whether or not you want top end power or bottom end power. So it's tractable, it's usable. It's not loud, it's not meant to be, it's just meant to be fast and get you from point A to point B in impeccable style. That's what it's meant to do. And that's what they designed it for. And back then they called it the boss's car. So Montezemolo put this car, envisioned it, didn't like the direction Ferrari was going in at the time. This is, you know, Testarossa and 348 era. And he said, we've got to build a good car. And I'll never forget when I sent the car that I have now for a PPI over to really an awesome shop, Scuderia Performante. And Anthony calls me up. Actually, there's two Anthonys that own there, which you might expect in Philadelphia. But Anthony calls me up and he says, you know, I think I brought this car into service when it was purchased new. And it was a one-owner car, so he knew the history of the car. And one of the first things he told me about the car is he says, you know, the 550 is just a good car. It's just a good car. It works, everything. And that's a mouthful for a Ferrari mechanic, I think, because you might not say that about all of them. So it was designed to be serviceable. It was designed to be usable. It was designed to, you could ride down the road and have a conversation with the person sitting next to you. And in doing so, it was also a 199 tongue-in-cheek, 200-mile-an-hour car. So a usable 200-mile-an-hour car, that's a novel concept even today, I might argue. And certainly not one with a gated manual and a little bit of theater to go with it. So the history of the car, of the shape of the car, of how it came to be, is all just intensely interesting to me. There are no wings on the car. It has a small rear spoiler. The under tray is fully covered. The car was developed with around 4,800 hours in wind tunnel testing, which was unprecedented at the time. So that's how it gets to achieve that speed. The dampers on it are electronically controlled, which was a new thing as well. So a switch on the dash made the dampers firmer or not through the ECU. That was not the first time that had been done, but between the active exhaust and the adjustable dampers, which were inevitably soft, there was not like a true race setting like we might think of today, but it was less firm, but not race. But still, those components of the car kind of add up to an experience that is unique to a 550 from other things that I've had and I've driven. I've had full-on muscle cars, you can say. I've had Porsches. I've had some interesting British E-types, Austin Healey's. I've had a lot of fun cars. Had some cars that were genuinely scary, and along the way just developed a love for things that suited my driving style and what I kind of just wanted to do with the car on a given Tuesday night or Saturday afternoon, whatever the case may be. And the Ferrari is just that. When I bought it, I had a vision when I bought it, kind of the first thing I wanted to do with it. And I wanted to take my dad on a trip. My dad is a golfer, and I wanted to take him on a trip. And I didn't want him to know that we were...
Play above.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. That story is perfect. I don't want to miss it.
Ah.
By the way,
That's a...
the soundbite where he talks about the argument of, a 200-mile-an-hour car, like the tongue-in-cheek 200-mile-an-hour car, gated, and some theater. That is absolutely has to be the soundbite with like that initial intro.
I was going to say, I love it's meant to get from point A to point B in impeccable style. Yeah. It's amazing.
So you got a couple of good right?
Yeah, the car has all of that, man. It's something else. Yeah. Rarely is a conglomeration of parts come together and be more than its sum of its parts. You good?
Hey, we're good. Okay, your dad golf.
Yeah, so, and I think right before you buy a car, you always start imagining what you're going to do with it and where you're going to go, or the first place you're going to take it, and maybe who you're going to go there with or you take with. And in my case, it was a trip with my dad, and it was a significant road trip. A road trip that we had done together many times, as we have family that lives north and we live south. And my grandfather's golf course and the golf course my dad grew up playing on and the golf course I learned to play on are all 567 or so miles away from right about where we are now. And I just wanted to pick him up and go play some golf. And it evolved a little bit, as you might imagine. So it evolved into me picking him up at 2 in the morning, not telling him what we were driving. He had the opportunity to find out a couple of different times because he knew obviously that we were driving, and he knew where we were going because we had to let everybody know we were coming up to play some golf, and my dad had to call some people. So he knew they were going to play some golf, and we knew we were going on a road trip, but he didn't know what we were driving. And he didn't want to know, which was kind of cool too. And I decided that maybe what we would do is if I picked him up early enough in the morning and we got out of here early enough in the morning, we could actually have lunch there and play 18 on the same day. And so we did. I picked him up about 2:15 from his house, had the clubs loaded already, and off we went on our road trip. The weather cooperated, and we got up there, unloaded, had lunch, and played 18 holes. Now, my dad at the time was 77. So if you take him on a 9.5, 10-hour road trip in a car, that's a gated manual that goes or capable of going 200 miles an hour, you don't really think that you're going to get out of that car and be comfortable, especially if you're 77. Got out of the car, felt great, and off we went. And it was perfect. It was perfect. And usually the things you imagine, they don't exactly turn out the way, but it was perfect. In the car, you're winding through the mountains of North Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia, and it's just eating the miles. Exactly what it was intended to do. Again, just comfort, style, and a healthy dose of speed. It was perfect. And incidentally, I did let my dad drive. Back to cars being relational, he had never driven a Ferrari before. You have to let your dad drive. Even if it's been a minute since he's driven a manual. Gotta let him drive. I have a picture of the smile on his face. Super cool. Yes, I do.
Oh, that'd be amazing. I feel like you just nabbed like the last 3 questions with that story, right? Like that was perfect. Yeah. The only thing that we didn't ask was what started your love of cars, but I feel like you answered that in residency school and that whole story, pulling up behind your quote.
Yeah.
That might have not have been a start, but it definitely was the start of that relationship.
The start of this relationship with this car, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I can talk some more about the car and the experience, my experience with the car, and how it's what I've learned about it, and sort of how it is.
Yeah, like the present and how you're using it currently.
Yeah, and how it is.
Where are you at for footage?
We're at 25 minutes right now.
Oh, perfect.
And if you have any other stories with the car.
Yeah. So how I'm using the car will come into stories. If there's enough of background, and I can tell a few stories, and I'll just go as long until you say okay, this is whatever. But I can definitely, I can definitely tell some stories. So, so after the initial trip with my dad, and now living with the car, it is really is a usable car. It's just if you wanted to, you could drive it every day as long as you kept it in service. I think you could just about drive it every day. Since I've had it, it runs better now after putting 5,000 or 6,000 miles on it in the last year. It runs better now than it did the moment I got it. It only has 27,000 miles on it now, and I got it with 20, almost 21. So it, but it runs better now. It does better when it's used. And the way I use it now, primarily, well, not primarily, when we're fortunate enough to, I will say that it is arguably, to me, the best date night car of all time. And the reason that I say that is because when you're on a date, you want to feel a certain way. You want the stage to be set. You're going out. There's a moment. It's a big deal. Should be. It's a special time. If you're like me and you've got kids, you got some time away, it's a big deal. Those nights are fun and they're important. And that car sets the stage. My wife loves the car, asks to go out in the car, looks forward to date night in the car. Not a huge car person. Why? Well, because she loves the theater. She loves the experience, the smell, the sound. She likes watching me shift the gears. Does that make sense? Well, if you think about it, it kind of does. It kind of does. So when you open the door to that car and you get in, like most really good cars, it takes you to a little bit of a different place and sets up your experience, whatever it is. Again, the smell, the sound, the feeling, it just sets a stage. And for a date night, that's perfect. But it's also perfect for a random Tuesday night. If you just come home, you're tired, you need to decompress, it can transport you, take you to a different place, and I use it that way too. So Tuesday nights I find a road and I just go for a drive. If I have something to think about, something to work through, it clears your head, focuses you, helps you think. And the car is all aluminum, but it still weighs 3,600 pounds. The weight balance is 50-50. The heel and toe capability is fantastic. The pedals are perfectly positioned. So you can go and practice your rev matching, your heel toes. You can go through some sweepers and you can just clear your mind and have some fun. It's a great dance partner. The steering talks to you. The throttle response is, it's a naturally aspirated V12. It's pretty good. And the feedback is good. The car talks to you. It dances with you. And because it's talking to you and dancing with you, it helps you to focus. And for me, at least, in those moments, I can find clarity where maybe just sitting still on my back porch trying to think about something, I wasn't getting there. But if I get in the car and I go for a drive and the scenery changes around me and I'm inside that little cocoon and doing my thing on that stage, I think a little bit better. And it just, going for those evening drives or going for those morning drives is so important. And, again, really part and parcel of how I use the car today. So date nights and solo drives pretty late at night are the two ways that the car gets used now. Then every once in a while I drive it back and forth to work, either out of desire or necessity, if we've got a car down for one reason or another, and it does that just fine. Not a car that you want to own if you're interested in people pulling up their cell phones.
You guys can go if you need to keep going.
So you keep talking?
No, I was going to say it's not a car necessarily for you if you're interested in every window rolling down as you drive by and cell phones coming out and taking pictures of your car. It's not that car. and kind of blessedly, you can fly under the radar and just go from point A to point B, and not the people that know, and it's a big deal to the few people that do know, but to everybody else, it's just kind of a silver car passing through. The spec on the car that I ended up with is Grigio titanium with the Bordeaux interior, which is what I wanted. One of my top choices. So I was fortunate enough to find it in that color. And understated spec for sure, but just the way the car I think was designed to be. Not wings and things. Not a race car for the road that let everybody know its purpose, that got within, earshot of it. Just a car. Really, 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 really special car.
So, if you could have any car, would you keep this one, or would you get something different?
The car is absolutely would be the last car that we would ever sell, for sure. Other things are definitely coming and going even as we speak, but it is the last car. And if there's one car left, it'll be the last one standing. Just because from an experience standpoint, the total experience isn't just not something that I found can be replicated. There are faster cars. There are cars that go around corners more quickly. There are lighter cars. There are, goodness, I mean, every tangible metric you can think of, there are plenty of cars, especially today, that exceed it in so many ways. But the combination of what that car has, what its capabilities are, is just not reproducible, and will never be reproduced. I mean, V12s are not a thing just about anymore. Not to mention internal combustion engines in general, not hardly a thing. They're not going to go back and make V12 gated manuals at Ferrari anytime soon. I don't believe at all. So to have a car that at the time was really about the fastest thing that you could buy. This is 1999. This is pre Bugatti. This is pre hypercar. This is just the most expensive Ferrari that you could buy in the time, and arguably the fastest car in the world at the time, kind of going back and forth with the Lamborghini. So it was, it was all of that before you could go out and buy a Pagani, or go out and buy a Bugatti, or go out and buy a Koenigsegg, or any of these other, incredible cars that didn't really have a place at the time. Pagani was just starting, but even in listen to Harry's Garage talk about how a 550 gathers speed from 50 to 150 faster than the first gen Zonda that he had. The car is just meant to eat miles. The world speed record car, set with some writers and editors from Car and Driver and sure other places. Car went 184 miles an hour over an hour. Now, that's 184 mile an hour average with 2 out laps and a refuel, which means that the car spent the entirety of that hour in the mid to high 190s, which is a long time to go that fast. And just continue, the car's pegged for an hour, and it was fine, which is pretty incredible. And it's one thing to get up to that speed and go back down, but you think of the amount of tire and air, just resistance and the engineering that has to go in to make a car sustain that speed for that amount of time is not the same as the engineering that takes it just to get it to that speed. Two very different propositions. So speaking to that, I knew that it had done that, but I didn't really know what to expect the first time I got in it. And the first time that I got in it, shut the door, put it in first, rolled down the highway. The very first feeling that I had was, this thing is so solid. Not the feeling I was expecting to have. I was expecting, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting the predominant feeling to be, oh, this is so solid. You might expect that in like a German car, but maybe not in an Italian sort of grand touring supercar-ish sort of a thing. You're not thinking solid. You're thinking beautiful. You're thinking, sounds great. You're thinking a lot of things, but solid. But that was the first thing that struck me. I mean, it's just solid. And the race history of the car that followed showed that, and now here we are so many years later, there's a lot of ownership history. People know what it takes to keep them in service. They're just solid cars. And again, you can't say that about all of them.
Do you think this car was the start to the end of an era? As in, it seems like it still has a lot of the mechanical aspect to it, whereas the generations that followed that in the mid to late 2000s switched to a lot more electronic, and now we're shifting to full electric cars.
Yeah, I think the car is absolutely a turning point, and as a turning point, sort of the beginning of the end of an era. It's the beginning of the end of an era in as much as it went back to a front-engine V12 configuration. It's the only one that was only offered in a manual. Everything that came after that was either automated manuals, F1s and Ferrari's DCTs. Everything that came after that, it was the only one really offered. Well, it was the only one offered completely in a manual. You got some 599s that were made with manuals. You have some 575s that were made with manuals, but it was the only one designed that way. And you can tell that when you look at the binnacle. It's two round Speedo tack. They're the same size. You don't have a center tack where it's meant to, be that way so that you can time your ultra quick up and down shifts with your paddles. So more traditional layout, just because you're shifting it yourself, and these two dials are kind of equally important. In any event, I'd say the 812 is the last of this era. And the 812 was certainly the spiritual successor to the 550. And after the 812, I'm pretty sure that we're going to see, some version of hybridized. And I think at that point, it's the beginning of a new era and the end of this one, for sure.
Sad.
I know, right?
Sad.
I know.
Is Ferrari switching? I can't speak on this confident or not, but are they kind of following the suit of Lamborghini switching away from the large displacement engines?
100%. 100%. So the next Ferrari flagship will be, it already is. You have the SF90, which is a hybrid. So everything's kind of following the direction that the P1 went initially. So, and the LaFerrari went, and now it's just more evolution of a hybrid system. And now Ferrari has finally said that they are developing an all-electric supercar as well. So that will happen. But yes, there's not a road, I don't think, that we go back to a naturally aspirated V12. The 812 is, is the swan song for that motor, for this configuration, for this layout. It's definitely it. It's quite a swan song there. The 812 is, that engine is an engineering marvel, honestly. So, but yeah, you can find somewhere. There's a lineup, or somebody just has the 550, 599, or 550, 575, 599, 612, and 512 and 812 right through to the end, so you can see them all. And I've got a picture of my 550 with right next to a 575 of the same color, and I've also got a picture of it next to a 599 of the same color. And it's interesting to see the styling departures. But one of the things that hallmarked the style of the 550 even, and made it unique amongst all of these others, European safety regulations, pedestrian safety regulations, changed the way the front end of cars looked after 2000. And they required the front of the cars to be taller because of, again, pedestrian safety regulations. So you'll see that in the design of the hoods, which essentially become taller, and the bumpers go up with it. And you lose some of that sort of pure wedge shape in the process. There's an indentation in the heat blanket in the top of my bonnet, or the underside of my bonnet, I guess you would say. It's there in every Ferrari 550 because literally that heat blanket presses against the top of the motor. I mean, it's the aluminum hood is sitting on top of the engine, and you can't do that anymore. And when you look at pictures of different things side by side, none of them, you can tell, you can see that difference, or how that changes the lines of the car, for sure. I can shoot.
You've been talking about how much you love the car, all the bits and pieces you love about it.
Yeah.
What do you dislike about it? What do you wish would be different? What do you wish Ferrari would have done different? If you could have designed this car based on what it is now, what would you change to make it your perfect car? Or is it always that?
There's one thing that I'm considering changing with the car. So the car has a 6-into-2 header system on it, which is okay, but a 6-into-1 system sounds better, sounds more like the F1 cars of yore. And I wish it had a 6-into-1 header system, and you can get that, and I think I might have to do that. But you can get a 6-into-1 header system, and that is a cool change to the, not just the volume a little bit, but the tone of the sound changes with that in a good way. So I think I would like that change for sure. For sure. Other than that, the car doesn't have any screens inside of it to speak of, and I'm so grateful for that. I don't wish it had a sat-nav system in it or anything of the sort. I wouldn't change the shifter, the engine, the pedals. I wouldn't change any of that. I don't know what I would change. They tried to make it as light as they could make it with the aluminum body. And welding an aluminum body to a steel frame, they had to develop a new way to do that, and they did, because those metals don't mix, as you know, for welding. So I don't know. I'm not. If you could make the car lighter, that would be cool. It doesn't feel heavy when you drive it, but if you wanted to really, really drive it more spiritedly, it would have to get lighter. So, but you'd have to work hard to do that.